Wokeness is a cancer, Christianity, the remedy. Welcome to Unwoken. My name is Nico Lagan, and today I'm joined by the Executive Director of Freedom's Advocate, Randy Crosson. How are you doing, kind sir?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing, Nico?
I'm good, good. Hard to get some sleep, but hey, that's what having a 4 months old son is,
Yeah.
right?
How's he doing?
Oh, he's good. He's just he has his days. I think it's normal. There's days where he's better than others, but he's either very happy or very unhappy.
Yeah.
There's no in between. There's
Well, he's got to be
absolutely
teething
no.
now, right?
Not yet. His teeth are not out yet. I think I was playing with his gums earlier and I couldn't feel anything, but they might be coming soon enough. That's going to be another interesting path. But
Yep.
hey, it is.
Long nights.
Yeah, no short nights. You mean very short nights?
Yeah.
Um, you know, you and I met on a, how could I call this, leadership meeting,
Yeah.
I guess is what we would say. And let's start right there, because you were the reason I reached out to you in the first place is that you're writing a letter to the government right now, and that was the reason why you were on that call. So let's start there. Tell us what the letter is that you're writing right now, and then I want you to explain to us what you do, what you guys do at Freedom Advocate.
Okay. Well, it's legal firms typically write demand letters. That's how they usually kick off some sort of a campaign towards either getting into the courts or getting it resolved. And what we were recommending to the churches in Canada was to write an open letter. So a little bit more of a less formal letter, but still containing the legal argument for the government to review. So it's not like a petition. It's more of a letter that we would have thousands, tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people sign on, and then we'd present it to government. So it was based on the recommendations, the 430 and 429. 430 was going to remove charitable status for churches in Canada. And so we thought this was a really good approach. We'd done this once before with a group of medical practitioners in Alberta during the pandemic. They were being told that they had to tell their patients that the vaccines were safe and effective. And of course, at that point they couldn't. 4 months, 5 months into development, and it's being released. There's no way they could say that it was safe and effective. And so we created an open letter and had 3,500 medical practitioners and professionals in Alberta sign it, and the government backed down. They pulled the requirement to do so. And it was an obvious ethical breach, so there's no way they could do that. So with this recommendation, it's pretty obvious the government doesn't really have a good handle on what the churches in Canada provide to Canadian citizens, to society. And so that was the objective of creating that letter.
Let me ask you this, because I remember when we were talking, when we first started talking, there were rumors that the amendment would be part of the budget, that they would remove that charity status from the church, so that tax exemption, if you will, from the church. You said it wouldn't be in there. I had heard that it could be in there, but it wasn't, right?
Yeah,
Because I haven't
they
heard
didn't
about
include
it in
it.
the budget. That's what I
They
thought.
didn't include it, which was really good. Because essentially, this is the kind of thing, Nico, that it would be better played out in the court of public opinion. This is something that's never gone before the courts before, so there's not a lot of precedent on it. So fighting this in a courtroom could take an awful lot of effort, time, money, those sorts of things. Because we now have time, this allows the church to respond to government, provide a legal argument, but also provide the societal argument. It's estimated that I think it's there's about $7 billion that get donated to churches in Canada annually.
How much did you say? Repeat that again. Repeat that again.
$7 billion that get donated by Canadians that attend church. Canada is one of the highest people that donate in the world. That $7 billion translates into about $18.2 billion in societal services, like back to society. And most Canadians don't really know that. They haven't got really an understanding of what the church actually does in this country. So feeding programs, helping the homeless, unwed mothers, there's a world of things that happen. One of the organizations I worked with in the past provided disaster responses across Canada, flooding, fires, those sorts of things. So they would bring church volunteers into situations like that, provide all the equipment to go in and clean up after a disaster. And so, most Canadians don't really have a handle on what that actually does.
So you're saying that this is the type of fight that shouldn't happen in court. That's the type of fight that should be fought in the court of public opinion. But one of the things that I've noticed from the church in the past, and I'm speaking as a Christian, is they are very lukewarm. They're not fighting the government on anything. They're listening to what the government are telling them. They're not fighting them. They're not going against them. They're not openly criticizing them. I don't know if that's because they're scared. They're spineless. I'm trying to find a good word, spineless. But is that what you're seeing with your letter?
Nico, it's interesting. Like, I've spoken to probably 400 or 500 pastors through Zoom meetings or in person. There's the emails that are sending out are going to about 200, and they're the leaders that are passing it on to others. So there's about 2,500 people or pastors involved in this. This group in particular understands the issue. The counsel they're receiving from some organizations or other lawyers is, first one was, don't kick the bear, right? You don't want to poke the government. They could get you. And I keep reminding them, I said, look, you got the bear wrong. You're the bear, right? In the system of government we have, the government should be afraid of its people. They should be mindful of what its people want to have happen. So my constant thing is, look, you have control here. You have religious freedoms. You have court systems that are in place that can be used effectively. You just have to start using them. If you don't, well, things start to backfire, and you start having things launched in society that would be completely opposed to what your beliefs are. And that, of course, we've seen that over the past 40 years with what's happening societally and all of the ideological things that are being pushed forward. And most of them oppose what the religious community would, are their beliefs, but they haven't stood. So they've had the bear argument, and then they've had other groups that sort of represent the church. They're, parachurch organizations that, claim to be representative of, a certain segment of them. But the challenge you've got with them is, yes, they've opposed things. And of course, through this, they've opposed government. They've sent letters to government. And of course, they're going to claim that they got them to back down. And they may have, who knows? There's another point to that. But those groups have been very ineffective over the years. All the things that the church would have opposed back from, let's say, abortion, they didn't really have an impact, did they? So, a lot of the things that the church would have wanted to oppose and stand against never happened. So that's a bit of an issue. It makes it a real challenge for, I guess, the rest of Canada to look at this and say, well, yeah, why not? Get rid of the tariffs. It represents $3.5 billion in tax credits. And of course, we've got a government that's launching a budget of, $78 billion deficit.
Yep.
And do you think they're looking for money? Right.
Well, they say they are, but at the end of the day, I don't think they care. Generational investment means that it's generations down the road they're going to pay for the deficits. That's all it means, right? But
I had an interesting conversation with somebody involved in the banking industry the other day. And he said, when you look historically what's happened when governments have gotten into this world of debt, and of course now it's pretty much global. There isn't a country out there that isn't way past their ability to reclaim it. I think it's Canada. Every 70 cents of every dollar goes to service the debt. One of the things that has typically rescued them is either war or collapse of the system. And so his perspective is that governments are intentionally moving to try and collapse the system within their own country, or
100%.
get involved in a war. And of course, look around the world, the wars that are happening and the support they're getting from, the Western world. Ukraine, massive support from Canada and everybody else, except for the United States now. The war in Israel, massive support for the Palestinians to fight again, all those sorts of things. And, there's other wars that are happening too. So we have a government that's trying to do things to rescue itself from the calamity that they've created.
You know, I think the person you were talking to was right on the first case that it is done on purpose. They are
Yeah,
collapsing our economy on purpose in order to. You think about it this way: it's a business transaction on a world level. When is the best time to buy a company? Either right at the beginning when they're about to introduce to go public,
yeah, exactly.
or when you know that they're coming out with a technology or a service that does not exist. This is when you want to buy, or you do what we call buying the dip.
Yeah,
The company is just dipping, but you know that they're coming up with something new. Then you buy. You need to kind of understand the market or have insider information.
yeah,
And what we're seeing here in Canada, what's happening, you have an international banker that is on purpose continuing the destruction of our economy over the past 10 years, because people don't know, the average Canadian doesn't realize that, but Mark Carney has been the economic advisor to Trudeau since at least 2021. So instead of having
yeah.
the dumb puppet in front of the camera, we got the guy telling him what to do, and he is not stupid. That man is not stupid. The people
Well,
out
it's
there
very
that thinks that
intentional.
Mark Scott, oh yeah, 100%, 100%, it's very intentional, and the whole point is to save the world by a one world government, a one world
The
bank.
reset. Yeah,
And can you imagine? You look at Canada, which has arguably the most untapped natural resources in the world when it comes to a single country, and the only reason that our economy is broken is because of policies, not because we have all the resources in the world to become the next Saudi Arabia. To not
well, we
obviously,
do.
I'm not talking
Yeah.
about the way that their religion and the way that they control their people. I'm just talking the amount of wealth, like Qatar, the
Oh, for
amount of
sure.
wealth. We have the power to do that, yet our policies are keeping our natural resources in the ground. And those people are not stupid. They are bankrupting Canada, knowing that when we get saved, the one world government will have control over one of the biggest untapped
Yeah,
resources in the world, and they wouldn't have gotten it for pennies on the dollar. So it's business. It's all they're doing is
yeah,
bankrupting us on purpose. But if we go back to the church, because this doesn't take a genius to understand what we're talking about. You just need to look at what's going on and do research that mainstream media doesn't
yeah.
provide you the information, and just read Mark Carney's book. You'll see he talks about this stuff. They're not hiding. Evil people don't
It's very
hide their
blatant.
intentions.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but if you notice, evil people never do. They love to tell you what they're doing. It's like they have to tell you what they're doing and rub it in your face because you're not going to do anything. And this is the biggest problem that I see with the churches. And considering that you do speak to a lot of them regarding the open letter that you want to send to the government, and it is my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but they're not being the most responsive because they don't want to poke the bear, to use the expression that you said. Isn't that not the coward way out, considering that Jesus Christ got crucified for telling the truth?
Yeah, he was quite the activist. That's true. Yeah. I think Nico, you're right. It's well, yeah, you look at everything that happened. He would stand in public with the Pharisees there. And of course, the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin, were the religious leaders, the political leaders, and the judiciary all rolled into one. And they had the power to kill you if you didn't agree with them, simply didn't agree with you. And of course, they tried to kill him numerous times, and he knew it was happening. Of course, he did kick that bear, and he wanted to get crucified. So, you know, but it's interesting. You look at Canada right now, and when was it that we got rid of all of our gold? There's only two countries in the world that don't have a gold reserve, and Canada's one of them. We got rid of it like several decades ago, I think, didn't we?
And you know who did, right?
Who was
The
it?
same guy that's in power right now.
Oh, his dad.
No, Mark Carney.
Oh,
You know,
really?
Mark
Was
Carney.
he
You
involved?
know, Mark Carney. Mark Carney was involved. Mark Carney was the governor of the Bank of Canada during Harper years. So
Okay,
yes,
that makes sense.
they got rid of most of our gold when he was there, and if I'm not mistaken, it was finished under Trudeau.
Yeah.
But Mark Carney was involved. He's not, again, not an idiot. Our money is what we call fiat money. It is based on trust. It has
No. Yeah, and it's not
no
worth anything
tangible
anymore.
value. No, and if
Yeah.
you read his book Values, he actually explains that fiat money is the way to go.
Yeah.
That having money backed by gold is not a good idea. And he goes into heavy details about that. He basically said that world economics should be based on trust. Yeah, sure, I'm going to trust the Chinese to not devalue my money.
Exactly.
Sure, I'm going to
Exactly.
trust them. But the I really want to talk about the fact that the church is not doing what they should be doing, and that because one of the and you know what? Let me ask you this first. With all, because considering what you guys do, your motto is basically your motto at Freedom Advocate is basically defend faith, family, and freedom.
Yeah.
Faith being the first one. And one of the things that I've noticed in the freedom movement is that they might not talk about it because they just don't, not because they're ashamed, but the vast majority of freedom fighters in Canada and in the US are Christian. And when I said a vast majority, I would say a good 90% of them
Yeah,
are
they are.
Christian.
That's been our
And
experience. The vast majority of our clients are people of faith, for sure.
so how do you explain that the vast majority, like a guy like Chris Barber, for example, everybody knows who he is, but he's a massive Christian. It's
Yeah.
not something that he really talks about as he needs to prove himself, but I've had him on 2 of my shows now. And if you start asking, he'll tell you that's where his courage comes from. His courage comes from his faith. And it just baffles me that you have guys like Chris Barber, you have women like Tamara Lynch that spent years wondering if they would end up in jail. She did go to jail, and now they're on house arrest. But you have people like them that are strong Christians that believe in doing what's right and standing up for the little people. Yet the church that should be above them, as in leading the way, is not. How do you explain that?
Because I've watched this for a long time. I think what's happening is this, because this is very incremental, I guess. What happened with Chris and other people over time, things like the pandemic, they really got people aware of what's going on, and it made them realize that we're going to lose our freedoms if we don't stand up. For
Mhm.
my late wife, Carol, and myself, we saw this 40 years ago. And so that's when we started homeschooling our kids. We saw what was happening in the school systems. And so we homeschooled our kids right through to graduation. And, this has been going on for a long time. What just happened in the pandemic woke some people up, got them moving. Um, I think what's happening now is sort of the second phase of it. I'm going to give the church some credit here, because the folks that I'm talking to recognize there's a problem. They understand it like they've never done it before. Of course, I've gone to several meetings and I've started to share some of the cases that we have. And most of the people I share that with, they're in shock. They have no idea some of this stuff is going on. And so, all of these pastors are saying, well, we've got to do something. What do we do? And, I'm actually doing a presentation to a group next week. We have a system. There's so many people that are saying government's broken. The courts are broken. They're evil. Well, it's kind of like saying a car is evil. The government is a system. It's a form of government. We have a democratic monarchy, a parliamentary democracy. So we have a system of government. We have a system of courts. They're not evil. They can work very effectively. So for us, 90% of the cases we fight, we win, because we will only take cases that we can assuredly set a solid precedent on. And that's really what the courts are for, to set precedent, to form the law. They've described our charter, our constitution, as a growing tree, and it moves in the directions of the decisions that are made in the courtrooms, right? And so we have to start using those things. I've had pastors tell me in the past that, Christians shouldn't be involved in government, in politics, because it's evil. And I usually respond with, well, if it's evil, it's because there's nobody, that you're not there. The Christians aren't there. If you want to bring good and do good to society, be there. And so these pastors, the meetings that I've had, they've been quite interesting, because, there's a lot of people that think the Lord is coming back soon. So I tell them, in the Bible, in Revelations 1:6, it says that he's made us to be kings and priests. So we're working on the priest part, trying to get that right, but we've completely ignored the king, the system of government. Like when he comes back, biblically, he's going to bring a system of government. It's not going to be a big church service. It's a system of government that's going to get implemented in the earth. Right? And so if we're not accustomed to that or aware of that and have not been standing for the things that we're supposed to be, we could be in trouble.
You seem and you seem to give the church a lot more credit than I do.
You know, Nico, I think I agree with you because I've watched a lot of cowardice over the years. You know, we've had a number of files where the church has just ignored it, you know, and the opportunity for them to stand and to make a difference and had no response. I think where I'm giving them credit is on what I'm seeing and not what I'm experiencing so far. So I'm seeing a lot of pastors being connected with us. There's 2,500 from what I can surmise right now. They're not turning away. They're still listening. They're trying to get things happening in their local church. I've even had pastors ask me, because we're trying to get people to sign up on our Freedom of Religion page on our website. So it's the group of people that will become signatories to the letter. And I've had pastors in these meetings say, do you have any ideas how we can get our people to go and sign up? Like, it takes all of 30 seconds to go, click, add your email address, you're done. That gives us a direct link back to them. So when the letter is done and the whole thing is built, we can have them actually sign it. And they're not backing away. They're still there. So that's the credit I'm giving them. They haven't run yet or gone silent. So we've got several months. So we'll see how this all comes together. So I'm giving them that level of credit right now. I think they want to stand. They just never had the incentive or the opportunity to do it. And so, because what I've done for the most part is I've worked directly with the local churches. I haven't gone to the denominational offices for the most part. The people have put me through and I've connected with them. But the typical response from a denomination on something like this is they're not going to do it, or they're going to follow, a much simpler approach. Getting 1 million people to sign on a letter is going to be very difficult to do. Right? And so I've dealt mostly with frontline pastors. And so those are the guys I think that they're wanting to do something. They're just not having much success. And of course, the church system right now is you've got a pastor who's been hired, but you've got a board above him. And they're the ones that will dictate to some degree what's going to be, whether or not they can get involved in something like this.
It's interesting. You said most of them didn't have the opportunity. They've had the opportunity for the past 5 years to say something.
Well, they have. A lot of the ones that I've talked to did not get vaccinated.
But there's one thing. Yeah, but there's one thing not getting vaccinated and explaining to people why they shouldn't, or why they have the choice. You know what? However you feel about vaccination, my son will not get any vaccine. I will never get another one ever again, nor did I get one during these times either. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing today, because I refuse to do so. But it's one thing, and this is where I find that the church is lacking. It's one thing to be a private individual like me to say, I'm not going to take it. I'm ready to lose everything like I did, because if that's the consequence, no problem. If you back me up in a corner, I'm not going to go on my knees. I will do the right thing, whatever the consequences might be. But they're supposed to be leaders. They're supposed to be shepherds. They're supposed to be giving faith, or at least helping their congregation have faith. Because my courage comes from my faith. If it wasn't for my faith, I wouldn't do what I'm doing today. There's no way. There's absolutely no way I would be talking about what I'm talking about, knowing that Bill C2, C8, C9, C63 is just a matter of months before they pass, and they come after me for the years of talking against the government that I've been doing. So I'm fully aware of what's coming, right? And that I know what's coming. I know what's going to happen to me. I've already been told that. It is what it is. But why is it that just a regular guy like me that believes in Christ can do what I do every day, have the balls to say what needs to be said, no matter how it sounds to people, yet you have pastors that understand are supposed to know the Bible from cover to cover? I'm no preacher. I'm just a regular guy that believes in Christ, that reads his Bible, but at the end of the day, I'm not a scholar. I'm just somebody with balls. But how do you explain that they're so lukewarm? Because just just believing in something is not enough. They're supposed to inspire others. They're supposed
You
to
know,
be leading the way, right?
you're an early adopter, right? We went through the pandemic. Freedom's Advocate, supported tons of people that were fighting in, the courts and everything to not get the vaccine. But those were people like you who were willing to stand up. They really saw it. They understood what was happening right from the get-go. A lot of these people that I'm dealing with right now, some of them did. Some of these pastors did stand. One of the things that you don't have that churches do have or pastors have is a board. Let's say you had 4 people over you, Nico, that were all telling you, look, you need to back down on this, get your shots, and just shut up and do your stuff, right? And that's how, I was on an executive in an organization during that time. And there was, I think, 14 leaders in that room, executives. And that was before I was here. And there were some real challenges there. There was a lot of discussion around whether or not we should be requiring the staff in this organization to take the vaccine. Of course, I'm sitting there married to a constitutional lawyer, and I'm saying, you can't breach their freedoms. And they never did. They didn't force it. But, there was a lot of pressure. And so a lot of these pastors that I'm talking to, it's interesting. The older pastors that have been in that church, some of them are founding pastors, but, they've been in their church 30 years. Those guys can make a decision like that. It's their church. They understand it. They know their board. They're comfortable with, they know what the guys on their board or the women on their board are going to say and do. The younger pastors have come in under a board that's been there for the life of the church, a lot of older people on it. And they don't have that kind of leeway. They don't have that kind of authority. I was in one meeting with a group of pastors, and one of the pastors finally said, look, you're acting as if you think pastors have authority, that they can lead through these things. And he said, you can't look at them that way. Not in today's culture, not in today's church culture, because there are boards they have to deal with. There's elders that are in place, and a lot of these guys are young. And I remember sitting in one of the offices of one of these pastors who just walked in the door probably 3 years before. He had his Sunday sermon to do, and that was it. He was very limited in what he could say and couldn't say.
Walk away. There's no
Well,
way. There's no way in hell that a board of leaders that don't have the balls to actually be on stage on Sundays to preach the Bible are gonna have the power to tell me, a preacher, if I were one, what I can and cannot say. I would have flipped the middle finger, just say, you know what, screw you. You can suck on it, because hell no, you absolutely not. The board of elders are not supposed to dictate what a preacher does. They're supposed to make.
In a lot of ways, that's the scenario we have. But think about it. If you're wanting to get the church to stand up and be what it's supposed to be in these days, what better scenario? Think about it.
100%. You're absolutely right.
It's gonna take them to really, as you say, grow a pair to stand, because you're not going to come to that kind of decision lightly. There's no way. You're not going to just say, decide, well, you know what? Gee, I'm going to start standing and kick the bear. You have to read it. It's typical, right? When does, the church historically has grown through persecution. The same is true for individuals. We typically have to go through some really difficult times to grow and to understand some things. One of one of the most dramatic things that's happened to me that's changed who I am the most has been losing my wife of 40 years. I realized I came to understand things I would never have understood without that event happening, about me and about who I am. And, you end up with a world of regret when you lose a spouse. You start realizing all those little times you could have said and done something to improve everything, their life, care for them, right? But it takes trials sometimes, trauma, to make things happen. And I think from my perspective, that's what's happening. The church here is coming under fire. I just did a podcast myself on Mark Miller's statement about the Bible and hate literature. And that's what's happening. There's those kind of shots being fired. So you look at these recommendations and no, they didn't add them to the budget, because from my perspective, they were fishing. The government put them out, for them to have gone through the Standing Committee on Finance and actually be recommended to the government is an enormous thing. And I don't think people are getting that. There's a group of 37, politicians sitting in this room from all parties, And they've decided to do this. And from my understanding of politics, yes, it wasn't just them that decided. There's a whole world of political drive behind every one of those recommendations. So this one came out on purpose, and it just sat there. There was no, oh, it just suddenly made it into it. There was a lot of discussions by the right people driving things within the government and saying, we're going to float this one and see what happens. And, you know, a lot of people would look at the response that's happened from it, that there were petitions signed and all those things, right? There was a lot of uproar. No, there wasn't. There was only in total about 40,000 people that signed off on petitions, and that was it. There's an estimated 4 million people that attend church in Canada. So 40,000, that represents, what is it? Like it's 0.001%, not even 1%. It's less than 1%, right? It's an enormously small number of people. So from a government perspective, if they're actually out there fishing and looking for ways to claw back that $3.5 billion in tax credits, they just had a really successful fishing venture, right? They now know they could actually do this because there wouldn't be much pushback. And you know, one of the things that happens in most of the meetings that I've had is inevitably somebody will say, well, you know, maybe the church shouldn't have charitable status, you know, because we've got too much government, intervention happening in the church world anyway. Well, that's a bull-faced lie. We have freedom of religion in this country. You can stand up for Christ in this world. You can do everything that you're called to, and to walk away from a tax credit for your people is just simply not good stewardship, right? If you're going to be giving money into an effort and you can get money back from the government for doing that, why wouldn't you?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you can be noble and say, no, we don't need to have the charitable status and we don't really have to have that. We'll do much better on your own. Well, if you're not even willing to stand for that, you're going to do much better? I don't think so.
You know, you made up a point. Well, you're kind of alluding to the fact that the government seems to be looking for a way to regain $3.5 billion. Is that really what's happening, or is that just the intent? They're playing that card as in it's just a money thing? Or do you think that Christianity is under attack, that our liberal government is willingly going against Christians and the church? Because I guarantee you something, they are not going to remove the tax exemptions from mosques, and they're not going to remove the tax exemptions from the temples out there, from the Jewish temples out there. You know that the only people they're going to go after are Christians. They would never dare go against Jews or go against Muslims in Canada.
Yeah, or any other ideology, right? Because, you know, there's the trans movement, and they've all got tax credit, you know, so there's all those sorts of things. So you're right, there's going to be, it'd be more selective. But I think Mark Miller is the chair of the Judicial Committee.
Yep.
Like, that's his role, right?
You're talking about the minister that actually said in committee that passages on that he called homophobia were hate speech. We're basically okay. Well, so we're talking about the same guy. Yep. Okay.
Yep, that's the guy. So to me, I think that's probably more evident of the thinking in the government than the tax credit thing. Because tax credit thing there's just too many benefits coming back to society from the actions of the church. But that statement by him has been made numerous times. There was actually somebody had actually proposed a bill, I think in the Maritimes, to have passages removed from the Bible. So it would have meant that, you know, Bibles had to have certain passages out of them to be sold in Canada. Now, it never went anywhere. But, you know, it just gives you a true sense of what's going on. You know, you have pretty much nobody in the House of Commons right now that would stand up and say that they're Christian, even if they were, right? Because they feel like they would lose their position. They would get voted out. And I think the challenge we've got is people need to learn to stand. if you don't stand up for your freedoms, you lose them. I think it was Reagan that said that, but that's a common historical thing. If you are given freedoms, if the people are given freedoms and they don't stand up for them, they lose them. And that's what's happening in this country. 40 years ago compared to today is day and night. It really is. But the reality is, and it's not, Nico, it's not necessarily day and night because the laws have changed. Yes, there are laws that are being changed that affect things, but the laws, the system is there for us to fight back and push back. Canadians are not used to using the system. They don't stand like this in the States. Going to court is kind of like going to the Dairy Queen for an ice cream cone. They do not hesitate. When something's gone wrong from a government perspective, the Americans typically stand. Now, the Americans that I know, they see the judicial system as something that's there to be used. So use it. Now, yes, they also do a lot of suing each other down there, but for the most part, when it comes to rights, they will stand. Canada, it's insane how people try to avoid going to court and stop. They won't do it. And even when their children are in jeopardy, like some of the cases that we've potentially raised where, we've got parents where their kids are what's happening in the school system is insane. But they won't stand because they're afraid of the principal of the school. And I keep telling them, stand, make him afraid. You have the law on your side, use it. And for us, we really do a lot of research on a case before we take it. We have to have a real good sound footing on it, feeling that we're going to win this case before we take it. That 90% thing is really important to us because if we win, it puts a barrier up for government. If we lose, government gets to put a barrier up for us. So you can't lose. So we have to do our best to do it. But there are hundreds of really good cases out there, but people are afraid. The reason we started a charity was because my late wife was a constitutional lawyer. She ran almost 50 cases and won 93% of them. But we were seeing cases that needed to go to court, really good cases, but the people didn't have a red cent to fight it. And so that's where the charity came along, was we decided we needed something that could bring the funds together to get these cases to go forward. Right. And so now we got it and we're, out raising funds all the time. That's pretty much it's become my life. But, we need a lot of money to fight these cases. This church one, for example, if it goes to court, it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Our average case cost is about $50,000. A case that we won probably just last year, and it basically applied the charter to all the universities in Manitoba, cost us about $200,000, but it was worth the win. Right. So now you have the charter applying to all of these universities that were, ignoring it in the past. And so for us, if we ended up having to go to court on this church one, can you imagine the battle we'd been? If the government got to the point where they were willingly going to do this, go down that path, create legislation, get it through the Senate, issue it out there and drop everything for the churches, they're going to have to stand and fight. So if the church actually did stand up and push back in the courts, they're going to throw everything at it. So we would have our lawyers sitting there against, one or two lawyers standing in the courtroom against 7 or 8 from the government side. And of course, they're getting paid for by our tax dollars.
You're kind of confirming what I'm saying, because you use an example of, obviously that must have been a case that you guys tried to get to work on, but you mentioned parents that were scared of their schools, and it kind of goes hand to hand with what I was saying before, that I would say that the reason why parents are scared to stand up for even their children is because they don't see their own leaders, like pastors in church, stand up for them. So they don't even know what standing up looks like, because the leaders that were supposed to shepherd us are not doing what they're doing. So they're looking and they have no. Well, go for it. Go for it.
Okay. So my wife got a call probably in 22 by a fairly well-known pastor in Canada who was setting up pastoral conferences across Canada. And he called her up and said, look, I'd like you to speak at these conferences. And, there's going to be 4 of them right across the country. And I want you to tell pastors what they can do to protect themselves. And she said, well, I'm sorry, you've got the wrong girl. She said, if I speak to your people, I'm going to tell them how they can stand. And represent God before their people and be a good example. So the call ended, and about 2 weeks later, he called back and said, we'd like you to speak on that topic. So she went, and I think there was 7 speakers before her at each one of them, and they were all talking about what they could do to protect themselves, how they could not be aggressive. And then she'd come on and tell everyone how that was wrong, and you need to stand. You need to teach your people what it's like to stand for rights and freedoms in our country in the same way that Jesus did.
Do you think it's time to flip tables? Because this is where I feel that we're at. This is what, at least this is what I'm trying to do. It's gonna get a lot worse before, like I'm gonna get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. But
yeah.
I'm amazed that, again, like I said earlier, that 90%, I would say a number that I would put on it, 90% of the freedom fighters that you see out there that went to court, that went to prison, that came out, they're still standing up, are Christians. And the reason that they stand up is because they are Christians. And just like me, their courage is through their faith. That's why they're so courageous, because they know they're supposed to be doing this, not because they want to, but because they have to. And they inspire people like me, obviously, and they need to inspire others out there. They need to inspire just regular people to do the same. But that being said, we tend to be very polite. And that's another problem that I have with the freedom movement. There's not enough of this, and I'm sorry to do that, but I'm tired of guys that are trying to be nice. They're trying to be your goody two-shoe Christian, and they're not ready to call bullshit when bullshit is. I don't care about Nico, swearing. I've called so many pastors to their face saying, you're a coward. You're an absolute coward because you don't have the balls to say this, and this. Why? You should not be there. You should not be. I'm not liked by Christians. Don't like me, but I don't really care. At the end of the day, I don't care, because I was told by God to be his trumpet, and I will say what needs to be said, because there's no way I'm going to God and explaining myself why I was a coward. Ain't gonna happen.
Well, it's one of the things he hates, cowardice, right?
Yeah, be lukewarm. That's why I always use the word lukewarm, because it's a translation directly from the Bible. If you are lukewarm, I will spit you out. Spit you out. That means you're going to hell. He does not want you on his team. That's basically what he's telling you. So,
I think we're past the point where it's flipping tables. I think it's a point where we need someone to fashion a whip. Have you ever thought of that? Like, he flipped tables, but he actually, it says that he built a whip and then actually used it. And for me, the old adage, walk softly and carry a big bat. To me, that's what the courts are. Right? It's one thing, you can get mad and upset, and I've seen a lot. Like, during the past 4 years, I've spoken at a lot of freedoms groups and met hundreds, thousands of people, and they're all upset. And, of course, I live in Alberta, and, we start new political parties here every 4 months, right? So there's it's just everybody's doing a political thing. They keep thinking that the system's broken, and it's not. It's broken people running the system. We need to get the right people and get people that actually have a heart for this. They're willing to lay down their lives to serve, so that the term public service actually means something instead of leadership. We've created a system right now where you become somebody of power, and the term gets used all over the place. This party is staying in power. No, the party's staying in service. And that's what needs to start happening in this country. Aside from that, until we can get to that point, we need the judiciary to help us, the courts, to do this. That's what they're there for. They're to set, from a constitutional perspective, they're to allow the people to set those boundaries to keep government contained within their world, where they're supposed to be, administering aspects of government. They're not supposed to be running our lives, driving all the ideologies down our throat, and opposing things that they don't like. That's not their job. So until we can get people in government that are willing to stop discussion, or stop, complaining and actually run, then we need to continue to use the courts. I'm attending the Alberta AGM for the UCP party this year. I'm not a presenter. I've got a booth there, and I'm going to tell people we're here to help government, and we really are, by keeping their people in line. And in doing so, it helps the leaders understand, oh, the people actually have a voice, because they're not listening to it in emails. They're not listening to it in letters, but they have to listen to it in the court. So when we win and set a precedent, the government has to abide. And so does every successive government after that. Right? So to me, the most effective tool we have to push back on government is the courts. And you can win because the laws, actually, we do have laws that work, and we can actually win in a courtroom, right? And it's interesting, we've had judges sit on some of our cases that ideologically were opposed to what the case was. But when you form it the right way, put it together in a way that they understand from a purely legal perspective, they'd have to make that decision, right? We're not there because we're upset. We're not there because, we're angry about this, or we don't, we hate that group. We're there because you've breached the law and you need to get back on track. And if we can do that successfully, then we start hemming in government appropriately. We just have to get people that are willing to fund stuff like that, and people that are willing to. Do you know Benita Peterson? You ever heard of her?
The name sounds familiar, but I do not know her.
Yeah, she's got I think her thing is called conservatizing school boards. And I think she's expanded it. So what she does is people that are thinking about running for, as a trustee or running for, as an MLA or something, she'll actually provide training and saying, here's what you need to understand. This is how the system works. And she preps them for it and then gets them out there running. And I thought, now that's exactly what needs to, if you're going to do something political, don't go start another party. Get out there and get the right people in government, people that are willing to serve. And you nailed it, Nico. I mean, Christians come with a built-in ethical system. The problem we've got in our government right now is it's whoever is in, it's their ethic that happens. Justin Trudeau. We've never had a prime minister go before the Ethics Committee as much as that man did. So we have an unrestrained group of people running the government. They're making up the ethics of our country. The nice thing about Christians is they go into government with an ethic already built. This is what the law is. This is how you operate. This is how you stand before your God and your people, right? So it's going to take some time. And I guess that's the positive side of what I'm seeing with the church. There are people there that really didn't know how. They've over the years been so used to having people to tell them not to do anything, to go hide, don't kick the bear, instead of actually standing and being men and women of God. And now's the time. So I'm seeing it happen more than I've seen it in the past, substantially more. Will it actually get to the point where they actually do stand? I'm waiting to see.
Just so you're the more I talk to you, and it's not the first time we speak, you are an optimist. I think I can say that with authority now. You seem to want to see the good thing in people, which is, I think it's a great thing. But the thing that I'm curious to know, and it seems that the audience is as well, because not too sure how much I trust the court in Canada. Complicit judges need to be judged, selected by the Prime Minister. I lost my trust in the establishment, and it goes on and on and on. And this is where I see it too, because you seem to believe that the way to fight this, or to fight our government, is through the court system. But a lot of those judges, let's call them judges. A lot of those judges were chosen by Justin Trudeau, and they were put in place by an extremely liberal individual, as in a woke individual. And what happens when the laws can be manipulated to be immoral, or plainly immoral themselves, like, let's say, Bill C2, C8, C9, C63, if they do become law, those are immoral. And you won't be able, if those become law, we do not have the power to fight the government anymore. They will literally have the power to censor us and to jail us for having an opinion that is different than the opinion they want us to have. They will have the power to crush dissent. So what do you say to a guy like me that believes that dealing with the court is, yes, it's an avenue that needs to be done, no questions about it. I don't debate the fact that it needs to be done, but to me it is secondary. It is something that should be continuous. That should never stop.
Yeah,
You
see,
should always be out there fighting the government in the court every time that there's a case that presents the opportunity to do so. You should be doing it. That we agree.
so
But
here's what happens, Nico. A law gets enacted. It goes out there and it harms somebody. We come along and support them and we fight that law. So we push back. And that law can then be declared unconstitutional. Alternately, they enact a law, it goes out to public, harms people, and everybody gets upset and mad and just gets really mad and starts calling everybody bad and evil. Right? You need to use the system. It's been given to us. Now, if you want to talk about it from a Christian perspective, where did our system of government and judiciary come from? It's an institution that was instituted by God. If you look back in the history, 1400, Moses, right? All those sorts of things happened in thousands of years ago, and we have a form of law that came from there. British common law, all that stuff. It's got ties deep into the Bible. They were given to man by God to be used. And if we just want to get upset, it doesn't get us anywhere. If we want to get to fight, then let's go fight. But we need to do it in the place that's going to actually be effective. The challenge we've had over the years is I still get cases sent to me by lawyers that took on a case, a constitutional case, a charter case, and lost. And they send me the decision and they're, all the stuff that came with it and the submissions. And I look at it and I would have had no choice but to decide the same thing. Because here's a lawyer, it's kind of like when you take your car in and the engine's knocking. You don't take it to Cal Tire, right? You take it to somebody that can fix it. And quite honestly, if it's a BMW, you're going to a BMW shop, right? You need to have lawyers that are involved in it. And most lawyers are just like anybody else. Somebody gets harmed by the government, they get upset, they're going to get in there and fight. You bet I'll fight for you. And they go and fight for them, but they've never fought constitutionally before. Some of our submissions are like 4,000 pages long. Like the amount of time and effort that it takes to fight government is enormous, right? But they haven't done that. So we've got a world of losses in the past 5 years from lawyers that have gotten involved. And the interesting thing is, as soon as they lose that case, guess who they blame? Well, it's not themselves, it's the judge. Like when I'm sent a case, typically that's what they say. This judge was a wingnut. Well, there's just like everyone else in the world, there are humans out there that are, wingnuts. There are judges out there that are wingnuts. There are lawyers that are out there that are wingnuts. We have to put our best foot forward. If you're going to do something like this and you're a Christian, you're going to come at it from a faith perspective. I don't know that I'm not sure that I'm an optimist. I look at so much of the dark side of what's happening in our society every day. I got off a call the other day and I was just browned right out. I couldn't believe what I just heard. And that happens to me a lot. I see the stuff that's happening to the clients that we represent. Can't imagine what they live through every day. I think what I am is more of a realist. I know what's happening. I see it probably more so than most people in Canada do. And I know the path that works that's effective is to use the court system. It was given to us, right? It's a system that's there to be used when the government goes off track to bring them back in line. And yeah, so I'm pretty ardent on it. I think it's the most effective approach we have. Well, in a lot of ways, it's almost the only one, because starting a new political party every 4 months doesn't seem to be working. We've had the referendum group. They finally got 150,000, 200,000 people to sign off on it. And then a couple of weeks ago, they came out with 468,000 votes to stay in Canada, like a petition, right? So yes, we can keep trying these things and hope things get better politically. But until people actually get in there and start running, people that are of faith and use the court system, we're just going to keep banging our heads against the wall.
There's a great comment that pretty much, to me, is bang on. That's how I see it. Too many sheeple is saying we're fighting a death cult with politeness, the Canadian way. And this is what I mean by we need to start flipping tables is, I don't want to say that that's that's what we should do. But, the guillotine was invented when corruption was too much, when there's nothing that you could do except remove the person that's responsible for your troubles.
Yeah.
And I do wonder sometimes if that's not what we're at. I'm not condoning violence. I'm not saying that that's the way to go forward. I want to believe what you're saying, that the court is the way to go. To me, it's one way to go. It's like multiple arrows, like you have multiple arrows
Oh,
that you
for
can
sure. Well, the
shoot.
political side, get people involved, get the right people involved for sure. Because
But
they're right. We have a lot of, well, we could call them evil people in government. The stuff that
yeah,
they're enacting, doing to children these days is monstrous, right? So that is evil. We need people in there that will see it not from a power perspective, but a service perspective.
I agree. I say this all the time, that public service should cost you something. It
Yeah.
shouldn't, you shouldn't be getting rich like our
Oh,
politicians are doing. It should cost you
yeah.
something. It's something that you should not want to do because you understand the implication. You just do it because there's nobody else to do it. I was just
I think,
watching the end of Live and Die Free, or Die or Live Free, Live or Die, Live Free or Die. It's the Bruce Willis
oh, yeah. Yeah.
where
Yeah.
it's about the tech. It's about all tech, and he doesn't understand anything, but he's such a hard guy that he just keeps on killing bad guys after bad guys after bad guys. And he gets
Yeah.
into a conversation with that young hacker, and he's like, "Why are you doing this?" He's like, "Because nobody else is."
Yeah. And there's room for all of that. Like, the activists that are out there, they're needed. Quite honestly, a lot of them become our clients. Our clients tend to be the people that are on the extreme, right? And
Yeah.
they're the ones that are standing up for free speech. Because the average person going downtown to work in an office are not going to be out there making bold and daring statements. It's those people that
No.
are out there making them that we represent, that most people would never want to represent, but they are pushing the boundaries. They're the ones that help us set the law. A really good example is the pro-life community. They're hated far and wide. And of course, they were recommendation 429. And, winning for them in court takes a lot. But we've had 6 major cases with the pro-life groups in Canada and won all 6 of them. And that's opened a tremendous door for the pro-life community in Canada to share their message. And oddly enough, one of the groups that intervened on the cases was a really well-known pro-choice group, a legal pro-choice group. And I think it was BC Civil Liberties. And they recognized that if we lost that case, the next government could turn and use the same thing on them. And that's really the foundation of our charter, our rights and freedom, bills of rights. It's that center. We have this pendulum that keeps swinging back and forth, right? And what the charter should do is bring it back to the center. So, for example, a lot of parents are upset about schools flying gay flags. And so they come to us and they say, we want to go to court with them, force them to take that down and put up the Christian flag. And we say, well, we live in a pluralistic society. We have a democracy, secular government. What we can do is force them to take that flag down and only fly the government flag.
Yeah.
And so we've done that several times, and they're getting it, right? That's fine. No one's trying to force you to live a different way if you're in the gay community and that sort of thing. Go and do your thing, but don't force it down my throat. And the gay community looks at them and says, well, don't force yours down my throat. And everybody says, great, we're happy. The school flies a Canadian flag or a provincial flag. That's it. Government stays out. Did you ever get a chance to read Bruce Party's recommended charter constitution for Alberta? He's
That
a
is one
lawyer from
person I would. I know who I know who he is.
yeah.
He was on Jordan Peterson's. I
Yeah.
discovered him a few years ago when he was explaining Bill C-63 to Jordan Peterson, and my mind was blown. Just
Yeah.
like, what am I hearing right now?
Oh, he's very libertarian, right? So the Constitution he created, he handed off to the folks, the Alberta Prosperity Project people, and it basically is 13 points, and it reduces government. It takes away a whole the freedom section, like where it says freedom of religion, freedom that doesn't exist. And the reason for that is the government doesn't have enough power to actually do anything. The government's reduced to managing a federal budget, security, so federally and arms and that, and essential services that are predefined. So, instead of having government facilities for
Yep.
hospitals, they might be run by private institutions, right? So it's quite different and a huge departure from what we've all had. And of course, from a
But that's what
legal
we need.
perspective, you know,
That's what
we
we
do.
need.
We you know, government needs to be emasculated, you might say, right? They need to
We
be
had.
put
Do you
back
know
where they should
Nadine?
be.
Do you know? Do you know Nadine? Nadine Wellwood?
No, although
A
that name
great.
sounds familiar.
Yeah, she's been on Party's podcast many times.
Okay,
Like she was there not
okay,
too long ago, and we had her on this week, and she basically said that we need to put government back in its cage. We let it out,
yeah,
and it became the monster that it is today. We need to put it back in that cage. They need to take care of the judiciary, and they need to take care of protecting us in military. That's it. All the rest
yeah,
doesn't belong to you. It belongs to us. Randy, we're out of time. We're gonna have, this is the first time we speak on the air, if you will. We'll have to do it again. But for
yeah.
the time being, did you have something that I always close with a prayer? So I will let you, if you have something to plug, there's something that you want to announce to the listeners, please do so.
Oh my goodness. You know, Nico, the we have a caseload coming at us right now that we need 2 or 3 more lawyers. Like, although I'm complaining that Canadians don't stand enough, I work with several strategy groups. So these are groups that we talk through the issues that they're facing. So around parental rights, for example. So we're probably connected to about half a dozen of those major ones. And in the process, we define what government's doing, and then we find a client, somebody that would be willing to stand that we can help develop and form the case around. It's just a lot of it is we need more and more clients to come in the door, but we need the funds to do it. So it's always, well, you know that. It's always a dollars issue, right? You know, we survive on less than $1 million a year, yet every one of our cases is going to cost 50 plus. And so it's been a real balancing act. And it's just, for me, if you're going to pray, that Canadians would recognize what they have, the opportunity they have to use the courts. Because there's groups like ours that can actually help. And I get it, courts are scary, right? It takes a lot of brain dump to make it happen, right? These building an argument and you know, all the submissions, there's nothing simple about it, but it's effective. It stops government. So I don't know, I guess that understanding would get out there.
I like it. Thank you for joining me today. I will finish with a prayer, and then we will call an end to this show. God, thank you for everything that you do for us. We are grateful for all your blessings.
Yes.
Please give us the courage to stand up for what we know is right, the words to speak what needs to be said, and the will to help and serve others. Amen.
Yes. Amen. 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 Thanks, Nico. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.